This week's TWAB or TWID is going to be an immensely interesting one. That's assuming that we even get a Bungie weekly update, which is something that we should be getting and we need to have, because there's been absolute radio silence on the recent occurrences at Bungie, both with regards to Bungie laying off a bunch of staff and also in relation to the rumored delay of the Final Shape expansion. There's been no official communication whatsoever, and in that time, of course, Bungie have cultivated a PR crisis, and that's alongside the very real crisis ongoing internally, and not least the one that they've created for their ex-staff members. So it's time to say something, because Destiny 2 players and the community also deserve to understand what the plan is. The conditions that Bungie's recent mass layoff create for us as a community, we should say, are nothing in comparison to people losing their jobs. Some of them as Bungie team members for over 20 years, simply dismissed one Monday morning. It's been absolutely dreadful, and I'd never personally play that down or seek to justify it. However, separately, many of us, the players who've bought into Destiny, spent hundreds of dollars, pre-ordered expansions, including pre-orders of the Final Shape. We've generally supported the game through thick and thin, and the communication needs to start again, like now. And if you're wondering why this remains the only conversation in your subfeed, on social media, and on Reddit, honestly, I wish we had something better to talk about, but we don't. And until Bungie offer an update, conversations around the game are more or less stalled, and while some of us are so mad that we feel we never want to play Destiny again, there are also many of us who still have some degree of hope for the Final Shape and want to at least experience the chapters to come. And so any forward motion into something more positive about Destiny needs to be initiated by Bungie. Of course, we've had a lot of news this week, and in the news over the past day, Destiny players are refunding the Final Shape pre-order. It appears to be happening en masse, and while many will still order it again in the future, considering that Final Shape pre-orders were already lower than expected, this is going to be looking absolutely dreadful on paper over there at Bungie. And given that a rumored internal statement from Pete Parsons suggested that layoffs recently are due to underperformance of Destiny and Final Shape pre-orders, there have been some folks who say, well, if you don't support Destiny 2, if you don't pre-order or indeed cancel, then it gives Bungie more ammunition to lay off staff again, and I do understand the essence of that idea. However, nobody in this community is responsible for that, ever. Bungie's failures are owned exclusively by them, or as we've seen recently, their staff, who have been punished for their management's missteps. And while that's dreadful, it doesn't make it our responsibility to fix, and these layoffs, as we've discussed, are part of a greedy response to a problem created at the top of Bungie, which ultimately we will never control. A random side note here, JP Deathblade gave a good example of Bungie's ability to generate cash just yesterday, and the Luminous Void shader, which came out this season as a silver-only purchase, is currently owned by more than 124,000 Guardians. And that's only around 0.2% of public accounts on Destiny, but at $11 a pop, that shader has generated a revenue of somewhere in the region of $1.3 million. And so Bungie generate more than enough revenue from players, even on very small things as we've seen, and to blame players for not spending enough, as Bungie's internal wording almost suggests, is just out of whack with why recent events are happening. D2 has undoubtedly underperformed, but Bungie have been spending mad money, including on their absolutely massive headquarters, which is finished in a very expensive way, in an incredibly expensive area of Seattle, Bellevue. And so Bungie have been throwing money around left, right, and center, which of course is up to them. If they're successful and they can do that, fine. But players own none of the blame for the situation that Bungie find themselves in right now. And continuing on from here, I personally believe that Bungie leadership should be the first people to communicate at this point, which probably won't happen, that's a pipe dream, but so far we've had one statement from Bungie CEO Pete Parsons, who seemed to take absolutely no responsibility for the events unfolding this week, in a statement that has astonished pretty much everyone that's read it. And Pete said, today is a sad day at Bungie as we say goodbye to colleagues who have all made a significant impact on the studio, and what these exceptional individuals have contributed to our games and Bungie culture has been enormous, and will continue to be a part of Bungie for long into the future. These are truly talented people, and if you have any openings, I'd highly recommend each and every one of them. Yet, you let them go in yet another terrible round of leadership, and not least have Bungie handled the situation in the way they have, but Pete Parsons' comment comes in a way that owns zero responsibility, almost as though someone else has control of what's been going on. And I'd say as well that the wording there is one of the reasons that some folks would assume that this is a Sony move, and I don't doubt that it takes two to tango now. Sony have influence as the ultimate owners of Bungie. Yet, reports have suggested that the layoffs come from the top of Bungie, and so on many levels, I can't get my head around why Pete Parsons said what he said in the way that he said it. And of course, beyond that initial news, Parsons also allegedly told staff that the employees who remain are the right people to continue work on Destiny 2. And I just can't help but feel that that initial response was a sort of fake front-facing attempt to influence the narrative. And we know that Bungie do this. I think we've seen examples of it. And this is in no way intended to be toxic to groups that have been represented, but I believe this is why Bungie pushed so many initiatives around gender, transgender issues, sexuality, race, equality, and so on. And I know that there are people at Bungie that have put a lot into those initiatives because they truly care and they're good people trying to make a difference in their space at Bungie and in the games industry in general, which has a significant problem with this. And I also believe it's important to do and that people have the right to represent themselves. That's crucially important. But it's felt for a long time that the ultimate reason for which Bungie pushed those narratives, at least from the top level, is because they want to make themselves look better. And in contrast, how many times have we seen reports of the exact opposite taking place at Bungie? Toxicity from leaders, homophobia, sexism, bullying, and so on. It's been a major issue at Bungie if you look at some of the old Kotaku and IGN reports. It's clear that this was a long-running problem, and ever since it found its way into the news, Bungie leadership have done everything they can to try and highlight that that isn't the case. And if you set against that the fact that this week they've also laid off folks who work on diversity and accessibility, it would appear that those initiatives and many of the people affected by those issues in Bungie are unfortunately highly disposable as far as Bungie are concerned. Yesterday I took a look back actually at Pete Parsons' public response to reports about Bungie's workplace culture, and there are some big clashes with his stance on layoffs recently. And Parsons said, as CEO, it's my job to factor both the past and the future and to be accountable for all of it here and now. The phrase boldly to the stars has fueled our creative engine since the beginning, and we take this same spirit of hope and improvement to the crucial human work in front of us. Our current and future actions around the care of our people will define Bungie's future and is our most important purpose. But which part of Pete Parsons' statement here on Monday this week demonstrates accountability? Which part of that response constitutes a good example of current and future actions around the care of Bungie people defining Bungie's future and most important purpose in a positive and progressive way? It's lost on me entirely. But looping around to my ultimate point here, given everything that's been going on, this kind of wording from Bungie leadership feels very false. And I know I'm being harsh. I also know that Pete Parsons isn't the only person making these calls, but this is the CEO we're talking about. They take ultimate responsibility for the spending, the decision making, and the approach, both in creating the current mess for Bungie, but also in handling the aftermath. And on all counts, the management appears to have been absolutely shocking, which is why I believe, as do many others, that Pete Parsons needs to personally deliver an answer. Because if you can own and push your successes and put your name against the good work of others at Bungie, then you should be able to do the same with your failings, because these aren't just rumors of sexism or bullying. And I'm sure that went on, but this is the very real loss of livelihood of your people. And those are Pete's words, our people. And the reality is that your people have suffered because of the decisions that those around the boardroom table make. And that's why you're being held accountable by this community. That's why the community is enraged. And if you own it, you own it. So it's time to do it again. We need that response from Bungie. We need an answer about the final shape. Again, they're still selling it to people on the Bungie website, launching on the 27th of February. People in the position of CEO shouldn't be able to pick and choose when they take ownership of these situations, and I just hope we get some word from Bungie soon. So there should be answers about Bungie, there should be answers about the final shape and the plan for Destiny 2. And until Bungie get that together, their PR crisis and the sentiment of this community is going to continue to fester, potentially into something completely irreparable. So it's time to do it. Give us your thoughts below. And cheers guys for putting up with more of this. I'll speak to you all very soon.